I want to go to our next guest, a man who I always enjoy talking to, the one and only John Kiriakou. John Kiriakou is former CIA. What should I call you, John? I can't use
officer.
Okay, former CIA officer and author. He wrote books, The Iran Crisis and The Reluctant Spy. You can follow John on Twitter at John Kiriakou. Learn more about him at johnkiriakou.com. John, you're one of my most interesting people to talk to put it mildly.
Well, thank you, Jamal.
Appreciate these conversations. So
thank you, sir.
For one, Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. And I have to say, if I could interrupt you for a second, I love listening to Esteban Carrillo. He has such a deep understanding of the Middle East. You know, I spent much of my adult life in the Middle East, and I still learn something every time I listen to Esteban speak. He's really great.
He's really good. He's been a really good friend of the show. And he stayed with me after everything happened with the radio station. So no, I definitely appreciate him. One of the interesting things that came out was that reporting is out that Hezbollah is basically Iran is being made to leave Syria, that they've removed their military assets from Syria at this point with the new government, if you want to call it a government, that's in play, basically telling them to leave. This government is much closer to Israel, has not taken any issue with Israel taking massive swaths of Syria at this point. I think Esteban pointed out 30% of the water is gone to Israel. They're like 20 miles away from Damascus. And anytime it is brought up to Al-Jilani or any part of that government, they have nothing really to say about it. What is this going to mean for Iran? I mean, their situation in the Middle East has gotten more fraught, right? With the destruction of Syria, with the collapse of Syria.
It has. Yeah, it has. You know, this is one of those classic, almost Cold War style power plays that I think people are going to study in the future. You've got a new leader of Syria, or of some truncated version of Syria, who on paper ought to be an Osama bin Laden style enemy of the West. And he's not. He's not. And not only is he not, despite having been the deputy chief of ISIS and the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria, he is now being courted by the United States to the point where an old friend of mine, Barbara Leaf, the Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, and two other senior State Department officials flew to Damascus 2 weeks ago to meet with him. And while they were there, the State Department officially lifted its $10 million bounty that it had on his head. So that's number one. Number two, you just accurately pointed out that the Israelis have essentially invaded, for lack of a better word, Syria. And they've taken a swath of land along the border with no objection at all from this new Syrian leadership. In the meantime, Jolani has the support of the Turkish government, and now de facto the American government. The Russians have evacuated. The Iranians have evacuated. Hezbollah has been essentially decapitated, at least militarily. And so it looks like this is exactly what the United States wanted to happen. Not just the United States, but Turkey and Israel as well. This is something that I think literally nobody saw coming.
No, not anybody I talked to. I mean, everybody was like shell-shocked, just at the speed and rapidity of the collapse.
That's it right there.
But is this, I can't tell though, is this a situation where the U.S. did this with the expectation that it was going to collapse? Meaning,
no, I think
they
frankly,
did this with the expectation that he's going to be in power.
I don't think the United States did this. I think that the U.S. was as taken by surprise as anybody else was. I think the Turks did this. And when I say that I don't think the U.S. saw it coming, that's yet another policy failure of the United States. I think they came out of it smelling like a rose. But this was something that the Turks had been working on for quite some time. And, you know, there was some telegraphing of it a few weeks in advance. The Turks have had absolutely terrible relations with the Israelis for the last 15 years.
Right.
Absolutely terrible relations. And just a couple of weeks before this happened, the Turks made this grand announcement that they've decided to turn around on Israel, and they're going to begin the renormalization of relations with Israel, and everybody's going to live happily ever after. And those of us who watch the Middle East said, what's that supposed to mean? Where did that come from? And the next thing you know, Assad falls apart. His whole family flees to Russia. The Iranians pull out, the Russians pull out, and the Turks essentially call the shots in Syria.
Wow. How much control do you think the U.S. has in Syria now? Now that all of this has taken place, now that you have the situation where Turkey seems to have the whip hand in this. And just to be clear, the reason why I said the U.S. is because, going all the way back to the Bush administration, the U.S. have been training these guys with the idea of trying to take out Assad. And so, you don't believe that the U.S. was involved in the training, the funding?
Oh, sure. No, of course they were. Yeah, of course they were. And let me back up. I worked on Syria for much of my career, and having been inside the CIA at the time, it was fascinating to watch the transition in the level of diplomatic relations that we had with Syria. We had no diplomatic relations at the toward the end of the Hafez al-Assad administration, and so when the Gulf War broke out with the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in August of 1990, the U.S. approached Hafez al-Assad and said, we're putting together this coalition. The Egyptians are with us, the Tunisians, the Algerians, the Moroccans, all the Gulf countries. We want you to be with us too. Hafez al-Assad saw an opportunity to normalize relations with the United States, and he jumped in. He committed something like 1,200 troops. It was nothing, but it was symbolically important. Right. The U.S. we opened an embassy in Damascus. The Syrians opened an embassy in Washington. And we said, hey, for the first time in decades, we're going to have normalized relations with Syria. This is great. Those normalized relations continued until George W. Bush was president. And we decided to attack Iraq again in 2002. And we went to the Syrians and said, we're going to attack Iraq, and we want you to be a part of this coalition again. And the Syrians said, we don't have any beef with Iraq right now. And we share a very large border with them. We can't handle Iraqi refugees. We're not interested in helping you. And we said, well, if you won't help us by committing troops, then you need to allow us overflight clearance so we can cross Syria on our way to bomb Baghdad. And they said, we're not in a state of war with the Iraqis, and we will not offer you overflight clearance. And we broke diplomatic relations with Syria. Diplomatic relations because of that. Diplomatic relations that were decades in the making. We just broke them. We closed our embassy in Damascus. We threw the Syrians out of Washington, and we decided to support whatever opposition was available to us in Syria. That opposition happened to be formerly known as Al-Qaeda. And that's how we got into this position where we had decided that literally anybody was better than Bashar al-Assad. Now, of course, you and I know that that's ridiculous.
Right.
But that became the policy. Literally anybody is better than Bashar al-Assad. Now, there were so many different factions in Syria that we were confident for many years that nobody would take over. Even if we couldn't take over, the Kurds weren't strong enough. Al-Qaeda wasn't strong enough. Hezbollah wasn't strong enough. And it was just going to be a state of chaos. And chaos was good for us because it diverted the Syrians from focusing on Israel. And, we always do Israel's bidding in the region anyway. Until the Turks decided that they didn't like the status quo. And the Turks, armed and financed and offered logistical support to their faction. And the next thing you know, the whole place fell apart.
So I guess, and that's kind of goes to my point. So is chaos the ultimate point? I mean,
it very well could be at this point. I think right now, today, yes, chaos is the point because the Israelis are diverted in Gaza and in southern Lebanon. And so if the Israelis don't have to worry about a regime in Damascus that's friendly to Hezbollah and Iran, then that's better for the Israelis. So right now, yes, chaos is likely a part of U.S. policy.
Wow. How far do you think, like, meaning, is this a situation where Israel is going to continue to take more and more land and Turkey is going to take more and more land? I mean, the relationship seems to be at this point that there's been some kind of communication between Turkey and Israel
Oh
and
yeah,
almost like a deconfliction between the two.
absolutely yes. Yeah,
Wow,
absolutely.
that
Yes.
is
I think well the Turkish policy has been very clear for many years. They want a 20-mile buffer zone along the border, along the entire border.
okay.
And they want to just take Syrian territory. Now, of course, international law dictates that they're not entitled to take 1 inch of Syrian territory, let alone 20 miles of it. But that has long been Turkish policy.
Mhm.
Israeli policy is not necessarily to take Syrian land, although God knows they have with the Golan Heights.
Right.
I think it's become a de facto policy for Israel to take more Syrian land. I don't think that they want any more than they have because they're going to have to commit more troops then to maintain
Yeah.
it. I think they like things just the way they are so that they
But
don't
it's
have to worry about Syria while they continue to bombard Lebanon.
it's a government that's not hostile to their interests, so they can just focus
Exactly.
on Gaza and the West Bank in that case.
And look at it this way too, Jamal. You've got Barbara Leaf and company in Damascus. What were they promising there? Were they promising development assistance? Were they promising maybe the construction of a hospital or an airstrip
Mhm.
or an electrical grid? What were they promising in exchange for a promise of no hostility or maybe eventually a path to the restoration of diplomatic relations? They didn't go over there just to shake hands and kiss cheeks. There were some kind of substantive discussions that had taken place, and we just don't know what the details are.
Do you think they're going to be able to form a government, or do you think it's going to collapse?
I think they'll form a government.
Okay.
And I think they'll form a government because both the Turks and the Americans are going to stop, at least in the near term, any challenges to what this new government may turn into.
Basically, put in money, investment,
Yeah.
building, et cetera. I mean, basically to try to ameliorate many of the issues that Assad was dealing with. They try to get rid of those issues. Because Turkey has
Yes.
been pretty clear. If it falls apart, they're
Oh
going to
yeah.
get more involved. I want to talk about Iran for a bit. You wrote the book on Iran, so you would be the person who may know. Trump is saying that he's going to come in with a pressure campaign against Iran at this point. How do you think they are going to respond to that? I mean, when I had a conversation with Morandi, and he
Yeah.
pointed out, he said, we are reevaluating our defensive capabilities against
Mm-hmm.
it, meaning we could accept a fight with Israel because Israel can't necessarily beat us 1-on-1. By the same token, bombings from the United States is a different issue, and we are assessing what we're going to do. Was it a mistake for Iran to not get further involved when the Hezbollah, or for that matter, the Hamas, or for that matter, even Yemen, was fighting Israel, as opposed to waiting for each one to be individually defeated? I know Yemen is still fighting, but Yemen is farther away. Did they make a
Yeah,
mistake?
I think that was a serious mistake. And I think that the Iranian people will tell you that that was a serious mistake. Um, the new Iranian government, and it's new just in the last several months, is already wildly unpopular on this issue because the Iranian people view it as having walked away from Syria and from Hezbollah, as you said, lacking in their support for Hamas and sort of turning their backs on the Houthis. Aside from supplying missiles and
It'd be nice.
drones, what have the Iranians really done in Yemen? Not much. They
But
just
the
supply.
Ayatollah is the one
Say
who
again.
makes what the Ayatollah is the one that makes the decision on military capacity. Like, wouldn't
Yeah,
that be on him, not necessarily Jesus, always have a hard time saying the man's name. Pezeshkian.
yeah,
Uh,
Pezeshkian.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the American view for the most part. I have Iranian friends like Morandi who have corrected me when I've said, well, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and they said, no, no, no. Ayatollah Khamenei has left this to the civilian government. He is the religious leader. And I responded just a week ago to a friend of mine, but that's not been the situation since the 1980s.
Right.
And I'm told that's the situation now. That, Hillary Clinton once said that Iran is not a theocracy, it's a military dictatorship. and the dictatorship is run through a civilian who is the president of the republic. And that's not what American analysis has been since the 1980s. So Pezeshkian is the one who's taking the heat on these issues. People are complaining now that, oh, he was elected as a reformer. He's not a reformer. He's a technocrat who's weak and who doesn't understand international affairs and doesn't understand Iran's long history in Lebanon and Yemen and Syria and elsewhere in the region. And he's blowing it. And if you look at it on the surface of things, he's blown it. I mean, this situation in Syria was a major defeat for the Iranian government. The Iranians, along with the Russians, of course, were the power players in Syria.
Right.
And not only are they no longer the power players, they're not even in Syria anymore. That's what a serious, significant defeat this was for Russia and Iran. Hezbollah, same situation. I was going to say Hezbollah was decapitated, literally decapitated, with the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. A week later, the assassination of his deputy. And 2 weeks after that, the assassination of his deputy. And so there is no Hezbollah in Syria anymore.
I kept thinking about, what is his name? He said, they were saying that they were going to, General Wesley Clark, saying that they were going to go through all of these countries within the course of all of these years. Now, they might have gotten the years wrong, but if you look at the countries that have been taken down, they have gone in a certain order of Iraq, Libya, Syria, and now Iran was kind of the last one on that list. Do you think that plan is still in action? Meaning, because if I look at this over the course of, let's say, 20, 30 years, it does seem to be correct that Wesley Clark ultimately ended up being right, even through multiple presidents. It still seemed to be the same plan and playbook, whether it's momentum, I don't know what it is, but it seems that they are effectively doing what Wesley Clark said about going through all of these Middle Eastern countries, with Iran being the last one. Is there some playbook that is in effect that has not necessarily been stated, but that each president is effectively running with?
Yes. What the statement that Wesley Clark made, he made something like 25 years ago.
Right.
It's kind of funny to me, though, that people still quote it, because for those of us who've been inside government at those, in those organizations, State Department, National Security Council, CIA, he just stated an obvious off-the-shelf policy. It's always been our policy to overthrow or interfere with these governments that we consider to be enemies. Governments like Muammar Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, whoever happens to be in charge in Iran, the Assad family. It's U.S. policy to seek the overthrow and replacements of those governments. That's not new. It's not even particularly controversial in government circles. And it's not something that we're planning to do next month or 6 months from now or whatever. It's the ultimate long-term policy. So to answer your question, the answer is yes.
Yes.
That is what we're trying to do. It's meant to be a culmination of years of activity.
I see.
And it's not even to say, Jamarl, that the policy is what resulted in the demise of the Assad government. Perhaps things that the U.S. did helped to result in it, but the result wasn't a direct one. But yeah, that's just an off-the-shelf policy that state and DoD have that we've worked toward for decades.
Last question before I let you go. Zelensky, in a recent interview with Les Friedman, there's an interesting part in that interview where he points out where they're talking about corruption. And Zelensky turns around and says, well, we were supposed to get $170 billion, but we only saw half of that money. Where's the rest of the money go? How does money get maneuvered and lost in situations like this when there's so much money, where you're talking about like hundreds of billions of dollars? Even if somebody takes $1 billion, somebody may not necessarily see where that $1 billion goes. How does that money get used and spent in a way where people can I guess, extract money from it. Because when he said that, I was thinking to myself, well, Zelensky's probably right. There's probably money somewhere that is just being ferreted away through some sort of organization. And maybe I may be asking this question in somewhat of an odd way, but I hope you understand.
No. It's a good question, and the answer is going to make you shake your head. The U.S. has a policy that dates to the Clinton to the Hillary Clinton tenure at the State Department, that aid must go through Ukrainian banks. Okay, not through American banks. It goes through Ukrainian banks, and at every step of the way in that transfer process, money is taken out. And I'll give you an example, a specific example that's kind of personal to me. Hillary Clinton promised $15 million to the Orthodox Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, Patriarch Bartholomew I, the leader of Orthodox Christians worldwide. $15 million in exchange for the establishment of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church as an autocephalous church. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church used to be under the jurisdiction of the Russian Orthodox Church. Okay? Hillary Clinton wanted them to break off, declare independence, and for the patriarch to recognize that independence. The patriarch said, I can't do that. The Ukrainian church has been a part of the Russian church for 1,000 years, literally 1,000 years, since 1000 AD. She said, how's 15 million? They said, okay, we'll do it. So the State Department said, I know this is, as an Orthodox Christian, this makes me sick to my stomach.
I can never do this. Nothing can make me do this. Here's $15 million.
Okay. So the State Department transferred the 15 million to a Ukrainian bank. The Ukrainian bank then transferred 10 million to the Patriarchate. And the Patriarch came back to Hillary and said, hey, we only got 10 million of the 15. And she said, well, that's a problem you're going to have to deal with. Now imagine that happening on a greater scale. Yeah, this is what happens in Ukraine. The money just vanishes into thin air. And then all of a sudden you have these Ukrainian oligarchs that nobody has ever heard of transferring billions of dollars to banks all across the Western world. It's just out and out thievery is what it is.
Wow, John. Wow. That is aggravating, John.
Isn't that awful?
Because that's our money that is just being ferreted away into somebody's pocket, and we have no idea where, and the war just keeps on going.
Mm-hmm.
John Kiriakou, man, thank you for this. I always appreciate you, John. And
my pleasure.
Best stories in the world. I'm always fascinated by that stuff. John Kiriakou, he is former CIA officer. John, are you still doing shows right now?
I'm working with Michelle Whitty and Ted Rawl and Ben Zinovich. We're trying to get something together. We're just posting once a week on YouTube. It's experimental at this point, but we're hoping in the next few weeks to be able to go every day. It's called Deprogram.
Deprogrammed. All right.
Yeah.
Well, when you get that up and running, let me know. I'll give you guys a plug on it.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate one and only John Kiriakou. Thank you, my man. You have a good one, John.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Yeah, man. John always has some of the most fascinating stories. That he has a hell of a career and hell of a life arc. Just fascinating guy. I always appreciate when he joins me on this. Guys, we have come to the end. I want to thank all of you. Let's see. And we have a new member. Alexander G. Welcome to the family, Alexander. Thank you, my man. I really appreciate it. And Mr. Ripley, he says, I didn't know Lex Friedman spoke Russian. I'm learning stuff. Yeah, I didn't know he spoke Russian either. I had no idea. I think it's fascinating to me that they could have had that interview. Because if you listen to the interview, he is all over the place. Like Zelensky is speaking in Russian, he's speaking in Ukrainian, I think at some parts English. But it is a very weird phenomena where the guy apparently despises Russians and speaks Russian and can't even really barely speak Ukrainian. It's just super weird. Super weird. Yeah, Just fascinating. Just fascinating. Let's see, what is this? Skeptical jerk. I hear what, Jesus Christ, I can't see it. I hear what Scar says, tells you where a little bit of truth, and he starts reading How Good America. Jesus Christ, I can't see it. I'm sorry, guys. My eyesight is a little bit weird today. How good America is and the rest of the world sucks. I don't think John said that, unless I'm misunderstanding something. He sacked out of his tiny head. Okay, I don't know what that one is. Busha Bandaloo. Thanks, Jamal. Well, thank you, Busha. Here's another one. Sardushi. It says the money meant for teachers and others was ended up at banks too. In Ukraine, they're thieving. Well, yeah, they're stealing our cash, to put it mildly. Olga from Kiev is baptized there. I think he had learned Ukrainian. Are you talking about Zelensky? Yeah, he did, but he doesn't apparently speak it all that well. Constantinople fell in 1204. 1204. Think of the history. Like we have like 1,000 years of history going back over this stuff. It's just fascinating. All right. I am going to bring this to a close. We have come to the end. Federal agent Zelensky is coked up. There is a funny video that has Zelensky doing the Les Freeman interview with like piles of cocaine in front of Les Freeman. It is utterly hilarious. One last thing before I let you go. And I'm going to say a trigger warning for this because, and I can't even really show the video per se. This woman's name is Namia Jamal. She's an Ethiopian woman. And she is currently up for sale. She's currently up for sale. I can't play this video because I think YouTube would take it off. But effectively, this woman is being tortured. She's being tortured. And she is up for sale for apparently $6,000. You can buy her for less than you can buy a car in the States. The person who did this and was responsible for this just got an award from Joe Biden. And she got that award. Joe Biden took this moment to give his Democratic cretins and other cantankerous troglodytes of his party awards, almost like medals. Here's your medal. You've been a great American. Here, Liz Cheney. Here's your medal. You've been a great American. These people were directly responsible for the destruction of one government after the next, especially Hillary Clinton. That woman who's being tortured is being tortured today because Hillary Clinton and Obama thought it was perfectly fine to put a bunch of jihadists to take over and destroy the Libyan government, with Gaddafi getting sodomized by a machete and Hillary Clinton laughing and giggling at how great it was that Gaddafi was murdered. Okay, fair enough. You got rid of him. And now you have a country that turned into a basket case where, yes, they were auctioning Black people as slaves. In that situation, that woman is being tortured as a result of that government and that country being in the condition that it's in. Just utterly disgusting. And Joe Biden decided to give her an award. So right here, a report from Conservateur says Naomi Jamal was kidnapped in Libya, tortured, and ransomed for $6,000 for freedom. People are being trafficked in Libya, a country that was one of the richest in Africa, and it's now a bit of a dumpster fire. Thanks, Hillary Clinton. And to thank Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden gave her the stupid medal, which effectively gets across that the metal is not worth the metal that it's made from. All right, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. And I'm going to say subscribe. You got to have a fantastic day. I may see you later this evening. I need to cut some of these videos, but you guys have a good one. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 72. Signing off. Be safe, guys.